Hi guys, how you doing? It's good to see you again. I've missed you. Let me get things kind of set up here. I'm gonna make myself just a little bit bigger today. All right, so it's like 9:30 at night, but I have to do this in order to get this video to you. So I hope you guys are safe. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope you're healthy. You probably won't hear from me Wednesday. Actually, I will take that back. You might won't hear from me Wednesday. There's going to be a day this week that you probably aren't going to hear from me, just because the fact that I will be at school and I will be loading up your lockers to get them ready to be sent back to you, your belongings. So there will be a day that I'll be working at the school. So kind of be looking for your belongings to be dropped up on your porch sometime in the next couple of weeks. So I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to hit on the last chapter of what we've been talking about when we've been talking about culture. We've been talking about the different native region cultures. We talked about South America culture. And so now I kind of want to, and then the last video, I believe, or you read, it wasn't a video. The last assignment you did, you read about push and pull factors and some, decision making. So today I'm going to spend about 15-20 minutes talking to you about cultural diversity and in the Western Hemisphere. And cultural diversity doesn't just start, it doesn't happen when you're born, okay? It's something that you grow up with. It depends on where you live. Depends on the place that you live. It also depends on your religious beliefs. It depends on your languages, your relationships with others. And so there's a lot of things that go into our culture and the diversity of our nation. But even back in the day, in the early years of the United States, with the Native Americans, with the early Africans, with the Asians and Europeans, we still see some of those particular culture styles today. And that's kind of what I want to show you a little bit today. I want to show you some of the different things that we have inherited, I guess, things that it has carried down from early civilizations to even now in present day. So what you see right now is a picture representing America's melting pot. And so I don't know if you understand this analogy, but I'm going to kind of explain it to you. When I was in social studies class a while ago. Sorry, I'm trying to get this thing to push back a little bit. Thanks. Our teacher gave us this analogy of a melting pot. America's a melting pot. I've also heard the analogy that sometimes it's a salad bar. Makes sense. And so cultural diversity in the Western Hemisphere is a result of all the contributions and interactions among all of the different races, all of the different ethnicities. And so that's the definition of it. And so culture can include, like I said just about 2 minutes ago, culture can include belief systems. It can include religion. It can include languages. It can include the relationships that you have with one another. It can include institutions and organizations. It can also include like your material goods, like food and clothing and your buildings and your tools and your machines. So culture can make up, those things can make up our culture. Our culture in the United States is different than, let's say, the culture in Europe. We're still human beings and things like that. We still are human, but the way we live sometimes is a little different. Our languages are a little different. And so that's kind of where I'm going with that. So I wanted to talk, let's talk a little bit about creating, the artistic side of things, like creating beautiful things. I want to talk about things that have been carried on from, early years. So you have the American Indians, okay, for example. And so they're known for their beautiful artistic creations. Most of their art was functional, meaning that it decorated something useful like pottery or weapons. Many Indians believe that the decorations and objects used in ceremonies provided magical powers. So today, present day, many of the American Indian art is highly valued because of the art, and it's very popular. Like things like wool rugs, jewelry made from turquoise. Turquoise is kind of like that light blue color. Silver, woven baskets and pottery. You'll see that even now because that's something that we value even now. That's the American Indian aspect of things. When you come to when you talk about the early Europeans, they brought much of their own art style and they brought literature with them. So that included furniture and silver bowls and jewelry. And one of the most obvious examples of a European artistic expression in the USA and around the Western Hemisphere is their architecture. So particularly, English colonial style houses, which are still popular in the US. And I lost my mouse. So here's an example of some English colonial style houses that are still pretty popular in the US. And, they look magnificent. You've got some of the really fancier ones. You've got some that are simplistic, but again, you've got these English colonial houses. I wonder if I click on this, would it take you to? Yeah, again, very similar to those other pictures as well. But then when you talk about Spanish and you talk about Latin America, that Spanish influence is here in the United States as well. Here's some Spanish architecture. You see a lot of these type of Spanish architecture, maybe in some cathedrals that we have around the nation. So again, you see a lot of these type of things, these type of architecture. Early Africans in America, they expressed their art in small drums, raw iron figures, ceramic pieces. Quilts were another form of African American art that's still quite popular today. African American slaves, they pieced scraps of material together to keep themselves warm, and so often legends and stories were told through the geometric blocks and the pieces together. There's an example in my book. I wonder if I can pull it up right here for you guys to see. It's called the Bible Quilt from Harriet Powers. See if I can show you a picture of an example of what they're talking about here. And this is an example of some of the quilts that are still quite popular. So again, they piece the scraps of material together. So this would be an example of maybe one of those early African American type quilts that you may see still around today. Asian art has added greatly to the culture in the Western Hemisphere. One of the things that you guys have probably heard of or familiar with would be origami. Okay, so origami was, it's that traditional Japanese art folding. And so that's something that has been brought over to the US, and we do have that popular here in the USA. Another thing that's pretty popular from the Asian culture in the USA would be the Chinese paper lanterns, if you've seen those before up in the sky, especially the 4th of July. We tend to see those. Sun kites, zodiac signs, calligraphy, that fancy cursive writing. That's Asian inspired, Asian art. Even in your language arts classes, when you do a haiku poem, that's considered, that's Asian art as well. So those are all recognizable as Asian art. And they're still popular today. And you've heard of them before. So kind of cool, huh? It's just another form. Music. Did you know that some of our music is inspired by these cultures? Music and dance is a part of every culture. So popular with everybody. But we can see a strong African influence evident in music and dance today. And for example, like enslaved African Americans in southern U.S. brought a musical culture with them from Africa. Since they were forbidden to learn to read or write, they communicated with songs. Slave owners thought they could keep slaves from rebelling or escaping by not educating them, and they were mistaken because many slaves used songs and stories to pass on hidden messages such as meeting places and escape plans or danger. Some were known as spirituals, focused on religion and appealed to God for deliverance from slavery. The influence of African music remains strong today in countries of the Western Hemisphere. So again, a lot of influence in the Western Hemisphere with African music. Language is an important part of any group's culture. The Western Hemisphere is home to many languages. Languages spread primarily through the movement or the migration of people. So European countries, particularly England and Spain, brought their languages with them when they were established colonies in North and Central and South America. In North America, people speak English and Spanish and French and many other languages. In South America, languages include Spanish and English and Portuguese, Dutch and French. Canada does have a lot of French speaking. They have English too. Mexico has a lot of Spanish speaking. They have English too. And of course, the United States is majority English speaking, but we have a lot of different languages in North America too, the U.S. In the United States, the English language has adopted many words from other languages, which I always think this is cool. Like, where did we get these certain words? Like, for example, the word squash, TP, raccoon. We know this from Blood on the River. We have talked about this. It was in Blood on the River. Those were all American Indian words because, remember, they named the raccoon. You remember? So, I mean, those are all words that we inherited through the Native Americans. Rodeo, taco, mosquito. Those are all Spanish language. We inherited it from them. Petite, like small. Brunette, like dark hair. Beige, they're all French. We inherited that from the French. Typhoon, gung-ho, you've heard that before. Those are all Asian. Banana, chimpanzee, those are African words. So again, a lot of our language is inherited from other cultures as well. Again, this is why we're called the melting pot. It makes sense, right? Another interesting thing is, and I think I talked to you about this at the beginning of the year when we were doing our 50 states and our countries, place names across the Western Hemisphere also reflect some of our influences of other languages. So remember Mississippi. Mississippi was an American Indian name. Chillicothe, American Indian name. And so Montreal and New Orleans, they were French. Ecuador, Spanish. So again, we do have a lot of inheritance in our states, in our countries as well. Kind of interesting, kind of cool. Oops, I pushed a button. I didn't mean to do that. So again, this, let me see if I can fix that. Thanks. So this short little chapter is just so you can kind of get a gauge on the influences of our culture with other cultures. When you talk about religion, I believe that's the last one we haven't talked about. North and South American Indian groups, again, we're talking about the Native Americans, had religious beliefs. We know that controlled much of their daily lives. We know that they believed in many gods and spirits. They had a lot of superstitions. They believed in magical items, such as dolls and dream catchers. They also held a great love and respect for the land. So again, we know that about the Native Americans. European settlers, they brought Christianity to the Americas. Remember, that's what Reverend Hunt was wanting to do the entire time of Blood on the River. So today, Christianity is the largest religion in North America. They have some major divisions, including like Catholicism. They have Protestant groups like Baptists and Lutherans and Methodists. But again, one of the major religions would be Christianity. There's just different groups of them. Does that make sense? I think I can say that the best I can. So the U.S. and Canada are home to many diverse religions. And they all kind of carried over from, the Native Americans and from Europeans. And we haven't really talked too much about the explorers yet. But they had a lot to do with some of our especially our Spanish explorers. They had a lot to do with our Catholic religion as well. And we'll talk about that when we get into the explorer section, probably the end of this week. Africans, I'm kind of reading through this just to kind of get an idea so I don't miss everything that I would have talked about in class. Africans, they transported to the New World as slaves. They had a wide range of religious beliefs and practices. Religious beliefs gave many slaves an inner strength to survive the hardship of slavery. In Latin America, slaves combined African beliefs and practices with Catholic customs. That resulted in a new religion, which I'm not very familiar with. You've heard of it before, and we all have, which would be voodoo. It was a mix between African beliefs and Catholic beliefs. So again, you can see where the culture came, how the different cultures played a part in that. Asian religions, again, I'm not very familiar with those. But Asian religions would be things like Hinduism and Buddhism. They've gained popularity in the U.S. as well in the last few decades as more of the Asian immigrants have entered our country, the country. So in South America, Hindus form the second largest religious group in the countries of Suriname and Guyana. So again, that is a religion that is around. You may have heard of them before, but again, another example why our Native Americans, I'm tired. Another example why our Western Hemisphere is considered a melting pot when it comes to cultural diversity, because we have so many different cultural differences, and yet they're accepted. And then we have so many cultural backgrounds from early years, and we still have them intertwined in our culture now, which is kind of cool. Does that make sense? I'm trying this. It's kind of hard to explain this without having your faces so I can see faces, but I'm trying my best. It's hard. My next favorite thing, I love talking about this because if I was in class, I would have actually brought in some examples, because that's what I do every year, but we're not in class. So you're just gonna have to pretend I brought in examples. So another aspect of culture is food. So we all know that in different places around the world, food is different. Okay. So like with the American Indians, let's just go back there. And even today, the American Indians introduced European settlers to foods like corn and beans and squash and potatoes. So they also shared their methods of growing and preparing them. Today, thanks to the American Indians, corn is one of the most important crops grown in the U.S. So we can thank them for the corn. That's a huge deal. European immigrants who came to America during the 1800s brought their foods with them. For example, Italians brought spaghetti, the French brought croissants and pastries, and Germans brought sausages and pretzels and sauerkraut. And today, people in all cultural groups eat these foods and many other European dishes. So I'm a spaghetti lover, so I'm totally going to be thanking the Italians for bringing spaghetti here because that's one of my favorites. African Americans, they brought to the Western Hemisphere as slaves, had to improvise new ways of cooking. So, for example, on plantations in the southern U.S., which there are still plantations there, slaves were given leftover animal parts, such as pig's feet and hog stuff. And they added them to vegetables like collard greens that they grew themselves. And so slaves also brought their own methods of combining rice and okra and black-eyed peas into gumbos and stews, which they still do that in the South. They make things like jambalayas and things like that. And they call those things kind of like the soul food. It's still popular today. Asians, if you guys are fans of Chinese food, well, here you go. Asian food was introduced to the USA in the mid-1800s when the Chinese immigrants began settling in California. And so after World War II, Asian cuisine, which was, Chinese food, Japanese food, Polynesian food, began to gain popularity. And so today, Asian food is popular throughout the Americas, and people of all cultures enjoy trying to use chopsticks. I fail epically at it every single time. So you think about it, now we've kind of talked about this cultural diversity, would you describe the USA or the United States as a melting pot? Or would you describe them as a salad bowl? Think about it. I think that's going to be my question for you in the comments. I think I want you guys to think about that. That's a really good question. So now that we've talked about it, would you describe the US as a melting pot or a salad bowl? Salad bowl. Salad bowl. So I'm going to put a Google Doc up there for you guys. Salad bowl. Jeez. I'm going to put a Google Doc up here after this video so you can defend your opinion with what I've talked about here, and maybe even some more of your own research as well and your own experiences. I want you to tell me what you think. Is it the same thing? Is it different? Melting pot versus a salad bowl? I like the thought process here, so I'm going to let you think about it. And I want you guys to answer the question in the Google Doc. Okay? So, yeah. I'm still thinking about it myself. All right. I'm going to let you guys think about it. And again, you can kind of research it on your own. You can rewatch the video again if you want to and think about it some more. Yeah, melting pot or salad bowl. I want you to defend your opinion with some thoughts from what I was talking about and your own research or experiences. All right, I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye.